All right. So welcome YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and welcome Instagram to our book chat and winter reading. We started a new. I've got to edit my date here on this. This is 2/6 already. Wow. Um, so we are into February. So if you're new here, we go ahead and do. We go ahead and do winter reading after January. Usually I like to start in January, but we ended up, we did start actually technically the 30th, but I usually like to start a little earlier than that with our winter reading. So I just wanted to come on here and talk a little bit before we get into the reading part about what's going on with the stores. I own a bookstore, and it is spread out over several platforms. One is eBay, the other is biblio.com, and then we have a presence on Abe Books as well. And then our newest venture is whatnot.com. It's a new platform. It's probably, I don't know, I think it might be like 3 years old, 2 or 3 years old. And I heard about it not too long ago. It has a real nice book community there, and so if you like books, you may, and you don't mind the auction style of selling, or buying, I should say, more like buying, then you might be up for Whatnot. It's kind of a fast-paced type thing. Oh, excuse me, got dust in there. But if you like that type of thing and you like talking to people that you're buying from, you might like that. So it's whatnot.com, and I'll put the address up here shortly. And that's our newest venture. And we have my biggest client is our public library. And so I have a lot of their non-library books as well as some of their library books. And so on Whatnot, I do a lot of children's books right now. I'm going through a lot of vintage children's books with the cool illustrations. And I just sold a bunch of Lois Lenski, actually, the last auction we have. So book auctions are Thursdays at 1 o'clock, and every Thursday at 1 o'clock. And that's what we do over there. Um, it's a lot of fun, and you'll have to check it out. So, I'm getting some new books in, and so I'll keep you updated on that. Um, and we do have our sales in the eBay stores. I actually have a non-book eBay store as well, so I have two eBay stores. One is collectibles, stuff I find with old books, like ephemera and pictures and old pictures, and there's just everything on there. There's modern books, there's figurines, there's I don't know, there's just all kinds of stuff in that, and I'll put that in the comments as well. And if you want to know anything that's going on with me, you should sign up for my Twitter. And that's RAB, it's RA Book Finders. And then sign up for tweets, and you'll find all of the things that are going on Twitter with me. It's easier for me to run everything through Twitter so that people know. I also have a Facebook presence, and if you like antique books on there, that's mostly what I'm doing on that. Or modern rare editions, like first editions. Book editions that people like, and want, in other words. So and for collectors too as well. um, and collecting for investment also. We do that. So, and we have a few options with that as well if you're into that. So we started our winter reading, and for you guys that didn't know what we were doing, this is what we're reading. It's called Agatha Christie's Sleeping Murder, and it's Miss Marple's last case. Okay, and it's really cool. It's a good book already. I really like it. I hope everyone else does too. But so I'm right before we start this, I'm gonna put all of the addresses that you guys need to know, and we'll get that going for you. And then let's see. I'm trying to think. Let's get the other one up here. Trying to get all my addresses together, and then we'll start the reading. Okay, so here's the other store. And we got these in the comments, and then I'll get the whatnot for you as well. Hang on just a second while I do that. Gotta go to a different browser for that one. Okay, there you go. So there's all the addresses, except for Biblio is just Rare and Antiquarian Bookfinder, so you can search for that and find it. All right, let's get going on this. I'm anxious to get started. A month had passed, and Gwenda had moved into Hillside. Giles' aunt's furniture had come out of storage and was arranged round the house. It was good quality, old-fashioned stuff. One or two over-large wardrobes Gwenda had sold, but the rest fitted in nicely and was in harmony with the house. There were small gay papier-mâché tables in the drawing room, inlaid with mother of pearl and painted with castles and roses. There was a prim little work table with a gathered sack underneath of puce silk. There was a rosewood bureau and a mahogany sofa. The so-called easy chairs Gwenda had relegated to various bedrooms and had bought two large squashy wells of comfort for herself and Giles to stand at each side of the fireplace. The large Chesterfield sofa was placed near the windows. For curtains, Gwenda had chosen old-fashioned chintz of pale eggshell blue and with prim urns of roses and yellow birds on them. The room, she now considered, was exactly right. She was hardly settled yet, since she had workmen in the house still. They should have been out by now, but Gwenda rightly estimated that until she herself came into residence they would not go. The kitchen alterations were finished, the new bathrooms nearly so. For further decorating, Gwenda was going to wait a while. She wanted time to savor her new home and decide on the exact color schemes she wanted for the bedrooms. The house was really in very good order, and there was no need to do everything at once. In the kitchen, a Mrs. Cocker was now installed, a lady of condescending graciousness, inclined to repulse Gwenda's democratic friendliness, but who, once Gwenda had been satisfactorily put in her place, was willing to unbend. On this particular morning, Mrs. Cocker deposited a breakfast tray on Gwenda's knees as she sat up in bed. When there's no gentleman in the house, Mrs. Cocker affirmed, a lady prefers her breakfast in bed. And Gwenda had bowed to this supposedly English enactment. Scrambled this morning, Mrs. Cocker observed, referring to the eggs. You said something about Finnan haddock, but you wouldn't like it in the bedroom. It leaves a smell. I'm giving it to you for your supper. Creamed on toast. Oh, thank you, Mrs. Cocker. Mrs. Cocker smiled graciously and prepared to withdraw. Gwenda was not occupying the big double bedroom that could wait until Giles returned. She had chosen instead the end room, the one with the rounded walls and a bow window. Bow window or bow window? Not sure. She felt thoroughly at home in it and happy. Looked around her now. She exclaimed impulsively, I do like this room. Mrs. Cocker looked round indulgently. It is quaint it is quite a nice room, madam, though small. By the bars on the window, I should say it had been the nursery at one time. I never thought of that. Perhaps it has. Ah, well, said Mrs. Cocker, with implication in her voice, and withdrew. Once we have a gentleman in the house, she seemed to be saying, who knows, a nursery may be needed. Gwenda blushed. She looked around the room. A nursery? Yes, it would be a nice nursery. She began furnishing it in her mind. A big doll's house there against the wall, and low cupboards with toys in them, a fire burning cheerfully in the grate, and a tall guard around it, with things airing on the rail. But not this hideous mustard wall. No, she would have a gay wallpaper, something bright and cheerful, little bunches of poppies alternating with bunches of cornflowers. Yes, that would be lovely. She'd try and find a wallpaper like that. She felt sure she had seen one somewhere. One didn't need much furniture in the room. There were two built-in cupboards, but one of them, a corner one, was locked and the key lost. Indeed, the whole thing had been painted over so that it could not have been opened for many years. She must get the men to open it up before they left. As it was, she hadn't got room for all her clothes. She felt more at home every day in Hillside, hearing a throat being ponderously cleared and short. Sorry, I gotta pull my glasses off. Let's see. Hearing a throat cleared, being ponderously cleared, and a short dry cough through the open window, she hurried over her breakfast. Foster, the temperamental, jobbing Gardner, who was not always reliable in his promises, must be here today, as he had said he would be. Linda bathed, dressed, put on a tweed skirt and a sweater, and hurried out into the garden. Foster was at work outside the drawing-room window. Gwenda's first action had been to get a path made down through the rockery at this point. Foster had been recalcitrant, pointing out that the forsythia would have to go, and the Wagila, and them there lilacs, but Gwenda had been adamant, and he was now almost enthusiastic about his task. He greeted her with a chuckle. "Looks like you're going back to old times, miss," he persisted in calling Gwenda miss. "Old times? How?" Foster tapped with his spade. "I come on the old steps, see, that's where they went, just as you want 'em now. Then someone planted over and covered them up." "It was very stupid of them," said Gwenda. "You want a vista down to the lawn and the sea from the drawing-room window." Foster was somewhat hazy about a vista, but he gave a cautious and grudging assent. "I don't say, mind you, that it won't be an improvement. Gives you a view, and them shrubs made it dark in the drawing-room. Still, they was a growing treat. Never seen a healthier lot of forsythia. Lilacs isn't much, but them wigglers cost money. And mind you, they're too old to replant." "Oh, I know, but this is much, much nicer." "Well," Foster scratched his head, "maybe it is." "It's right," said Gwenda, nodding her head. She asked suddenly, who lived here before the Hengraves? They weren't here very long, were they?" "Matter of 6 years or so. Didn't belong afore them. The Miss Elworths, very churchy folk, low church, missions to the heathen. Once had a black clergyman staying here, they did. 4 of 'em there was, and their brother, but he didn't get much of a look in with all those women. Before them, now let me see, it was Mrs. Findison. Ah, she was the real gentry, she was. She was living here before I was born." "Did she die here?" asked Gwenda. "Died out in Egypt or some place like that, but they brought her home. She's buried up to the churchyard. She planted that magnolia and those lab labyrinth labyrintums. I don't never heard of that one. And those pittospores. Fond of shrubs she was." Foster continued. "Weren't none of those new houses built up along the hill then. Countrified it was. No cinema then. And none of them new shops. Or that there parade on the front." His tone held the disapproval of the aged for all innovations. "Changes," he said with a snort. "Nothing but changes." "I suppose things are bound to change," said Gwenda. After all, there are lots of improvements nowadays, aren't there?" "So they say. I ain't noticed them. Changes." He gestured toward the macrocarpa hedge on the left, through which the gleam of a building showed. "Used to be the cottage hospital, that used," he said. "Nice place and handy. Then they goes and builds a great place near to a mile out of town. 20 minutes walk if you want to get there on a visiting day. Or threepence, or threepence on the bus." He gestured once more towards the hedge. "It's a girls' school now. Moved in 10 years ago. Moved in 10 years ago. Changes all the time. People takes a house nowadays and lives in it for 10 or 12 years, and then off they goes, restless. What's the good of it? You can't do any proper planting unless you can look well ahead. Gwenda looked affectionately at the magnolia. Like Mrs. Fendison, she said. Ah, she was a proper kind. Come here as a bride, she did. Brought up her children and them, married her husband, had her grandchildren down in the summers, and took off in the end when she was nigh on 80. Foster's tone held warm approval. Gwenda went back into the house, smiling a little. She interviewed the workmen and then returned to the drawing room, where she sat down at the desk and wrote some letters. Amongst the correspondence that remained to be answered was a letter from some cousins of Giles who lived in London. Any time she wanted to come to London, they begged her to come and stay with them at their house in Chelsea. Raymond West was a well-known, rather than popular novelist, and his wife Joan, Gwenda knew, was a painter. It would be fun to go and stay with them, though probably they would think she was a most terrible Philistine. Neither Giles nor I are a bit highbrow, reflected Gwenda. A sonorous gong boomed pontifically from the hall, surrounded by a great deal of curved and tortured black wood. The gong had been one of Giles' aunt's prized possessions. Mrs. Cocker herself appeared to derive distinct pleasure from sounding it, and always gave full measure. Gwenda put her hands to her ears and got up. Well, we're a little bit ways. Let's see. She walked quickly across the drawing room to the wall by the far window, and then brought herself up short with an exclamation of annoyance. It was the third time she'd done that. She always seemed to expect to be able to walk through solid wall into the dining room next door. She went back across the room and out into the front hall, and then around the angle of the drawing room wall, and so along to the dining room. It was a long way around, and it would be annoying in winter, for the front hall was draughty, and the only central heating was in the drawing room and dining room and 2 bedrooms upstairs. I don't see, thought Gwenda to herself as she sat down at the charming Sheraton dining table, which she had just bought at vast expense in lieu of Aunt Lavender's massive, massive, square mahogany one. I don't see why I shouldn't have a doorway made through from the drawing room to the dining room. I'll talk to Mr. Sims about it and when he comes this afternoon. Mr. Sims was the builder and decorator, a persuasive middle-aged man with a husky voice and a little notebook which he always held at the ready to jot down any expensive idea that might occur to his patrons. Mr. Sims was, when consulted, was keenly appreciative. Simplest thing in the world, Mrs. Reed, and a great improvement, if I may say so. Would it be very expensive? Gwenda was by now a little doubtful of Mr. Sims' accents and enthusiasms. There had been a little unpleasantness over various extras, not included in Mr. Sims' original estimate. A mere trifle, said Mr. Sims, this husky voice indulgent and reassuring. Gwenda looked more doubtful than ever. It was Mr. Sims' trifles that she had learned to distrust. His straightforward estimates were studiously moderate. "I'll tell you what, Mrs. Reed," said Mr. Sims coaxingly. "I'll get Taylor to have a look when he's finished with the dressing room this afternoon, and then I can give you an exact idea. Depends what the wall's like." Gwenda assented. She wrote to Joan West thanking her for the invitation, but saying that she would not be leaving Dilmouth at present since she wanted to keep an eye on the workmen. Then she went out for a walk along the front and enjoyed the sea breeze. She came back into the drawing room, and Taylor, Mr. Sim's leading workman, straightened up from the corner and greeted her with a grin. "Won't be no difficulty about this, Mrs. Reed," he said. "Been a door there before, there has. Somebody as didn't want it as just had it plastered over." Gwenda was agreeably surprised. "How extraordinary," she thought, "that I've always seemed to feel there was a door there." She remembered in the confident way she had walked to it at lunchtime, and remembering it quite suddenly, she felt a tiny shiver of uneasiness. When you come to think of it, it was really rather odd. Why should she have felt so sure that there was a door there? There was no sign of it on the outside wall. How had she known that there was a door just there? Of course it would be convenient to have a door through to the dining room, but why had she always gone so unerringly to that one particular spot? Anywhere on the dividing wall would have done equally well, but she had always gone automatically thinking of other things to the one place where the door had actually been. "I hope," thought Gwenda uneasily, "that I'm not clairvoyant or anything." There had never been anything in the least psychic about her. She wasn't that kind of person, or was she? "Oh, welcome, Louise. Welcome in. Um, let's see." The path outside from the terrace down through the shrubbery to the lawn, had she in some way known it was there when she was so insistent on having it made in that particular place. Perhaps I am a bit psychic, thought Gwenda uneasily. Or is it something to do with the house? Why had she asked Mrs. Hengrave that day if the house was haunted? It wasn't haunted, it was a darling house. There couldn't be anything wrong with the house. Why, Mrs. Hengrave had seemed quite surprised by the idea. Or had there been a trace of reserve, of wariness in her manner? Good heavens, I'm beginning to imagine things, thought Gwenda. She brought her mind back with an effort to her discussion with Taylor. "There's one other thing," she added. "One of the cupboards in my upstairs room is stuck, and I wanted to get it opened." The man came up with her and examined the door. "It's been painted over more than once," he said. "I'll get the men to get it open for you tomorrow, if that will do." Gwenda acquiesced, and Taylor went away. That evening, Gwenda felt jumpy and nervous, sitting in the drawing room and trying to read. She was aware of every creak in the furniture. Once or twice she looked over her shoulder and shivered. She told herself repeatedly that there was nothing in the incident of the door and the path. They were just coincidences. In any case, they were the result of plain common sense. Without admitting it to herself, she felt nervous about going up to bed. When she finally got up and turned off the lights and opened the door into the hall, she found herself dreading to go up the stairs. She almost ran up them in her haste, hurried along the passage, and opened the door of her room. Once inside, she at once felt her fears calmed and appeased. She looked around the room affectionately. She felt safe in here, safe and happy. Yes, now she was here. She was safe. Safe from what, you idiot? She asked herself. She looked at her pajamas spread out on the bed and her bedroom slippers below them. Really, Gwenda, you might be 6 years old. You ought to have bunny shoes with rabbits on them. She got into bed with a sense of relief and was soon asleep. The next morning she had various matters to see in the town. When she came back it was lunchtime. The men have got the cupboard open in your bedroom, ma'am, said Mrs. Cocker as she brought in the delicately fried sole, the mashed potatoes, and the creamed carrots. Oh, good, said Gwenda. She was hungry and enjoyed her lunch. After having coffee in the drawing room, she went upstairs to her bedroom. Crossing the room, she pulled open the door of the corner cupboard. Then she uttered a sudden, frightened little cry and stood staring. The inside of the cupboard revealed the original papering of the wall, which elsewhere had been done over in the yellowish wall paint. The room had once been gaily papered in a floral design, a design of little bunches of scarlet poppies alternating with bunches of blue cornflowers. Gwenda stood there staring a long time. Then she went shakily over to the bed and sat down on it. Here she was in a house she had never been in before, in a country she had never visited, and only 2 days ago she had lain in bed imagining a paper for this very room, and the paper she had imagined corresponded exactly with the paper that had once hung on the walls. Wild fragments of explanation whirled round in her head. Dawn experiment with time, seeing forward instead of back. She could explain the garden path and the connecting door as coincidence, but there couldn't be coincidence about this. You couldn't conceivably imagine a wallpaper of such distinctive design and then find one exactly as you had imagined it. No, there was some explanation that eluded her and that, yes, frightened her. Every now and then she was seeing, not forward but back to some former state of the house. Any moment she might see something more, something she didn't want to see. The house frightened her. But was it the house or herself? She didn't want to be the one of those people who saw things. She drew a long breath, put on her hat and coat, and slipped quickly out of the house. At the post office she sent the following telegram: West 19 Adway Square, Chelsea, London. May I change my mind and come to you tomorrow? Gwenda. She sent it. Reply paid. And that is the chapter for this evening. Hope you enjoyed it, you guys, on Instagram. I don't see too many on the other, but I hope you enjoyed that. Trying to get the page to... There it is. Go down. I don't like dog earring things, but it's a paperback, so I figure that's okay for now. So if you can, I'm going to have you should join us tomorrow if you like collectible type things. I have a 1 o'clock auction that is for collectibles on Whatnot, and the address is in the Reach Streams, which if you guys are on Facebook or part of my Facebook group, you should be able to find that address and click on it and become a member of Whatnot. It's totally free. There's nothing, you have to pay for. You just sign up and as a buyer, and that's it. So, okay. Well, I'm going to let you guys go for the night. I hope you have a great week, and we will see you next Monday at 7:30 Central Standard Time. All right, we'll see you later. Thank you for joining, guys.